Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Consumer Social Podcast, the show where we talk with builders in the consumer social industry about their successes, learnings, and failures. I'm your host, Jose, and today we're here with Marek. Marek, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the show. Why don't we start by you introducing yourself and telling what you're all about? Who's Marek, and what has he been up to?
Yeah. Thanks, Jose. Great to be here today. And yeah, wonderful to have a show about consumer social. I feel like it's a space in the tech industry that's overlooked by many, and especially with the recent hypes in AI and Web3. I'm happy that we're getting some spotlight as well. But regarding me, I'm Marek. I am a co-founder at Combyne, which is a consumer social fashion app. You can think of it as Pinterest with fashion focus, where users can create outfits, mood boards, and share them with their friends. Before I co-founded Combyne, I was actually VC. I had a short stint at Plug and Play, based in Munich, where we're investing into pre-seed and seed stage companies with retail focus. And I started my career in M&A. But yeah, that was not something that I wanted to do for a long time, and definitely now enjoying my progression to the seat of a founder much more.
Nice. So you do kind of the reverse role of what most people do from founder to VC.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right one, but so far it's been my journey.
Okay, nice. So I want to start with a kind of housekeeping question. So right now, consumer social means different things to different people, and one of my goals here with the podcast is to consolidate the meaning, so that when we say consumer social, people actually know what they're pointing to. What does consumer social mean to you?
Great question. For me, consumer social, it's very much applications for consumers that are improving the social connection. So it can be either communication, creation, or a mix of both. And therefore, I think it's really in the consumer social space most important to think of people as interacting with other people, and anything that helps them do that or does it in a different way in a digitally native format is what I would consider to be consumer social.
Okay, perfect. That is concise and to the point. Amazing. It's actually interesting. We've had different answers here, and so it's been helpful in the consolidation of the meaning.
Hmm. Yeah, I do find it interesting because a lot of the times when I just say I'm working on consumer social, I get very confused looks. Usually the response is, "Oh, so you're trying to build the next Facebook," which I'm always hesitant to answer because, in a way, yes, but also very big no. And it is, I think, the case right now that a lot of people have or know consumer social only through the big players, right? So you have, of course, Facebook, you have Instagram, you have Discord. But what I'm excited about is the more niche applications, or actually things that are almost in the counterculture, right, to these big ones, which what is what I see as consumer social to be about. It's very much how can we create connection that we lost because the first wave of big consumer social applications connected us in a way that we actually feel much more lonely and more isolated.
Okay, so you make the distinction between the first ones and now the new school, the counterculture.
100%. 100%.
And you touched a little bit on your background there, the way you went from M&A consultant to VC to now founder. I want to ask you more deeply about that. What's your background, and also what convinced you, or what made you come over to the consumer social side as a founder?
Mhm. I've always been a little bit of a, you could call it schizophrenic or double personality. I studied economics at New York University in Abu Dhabi with a minor in visual arts. And that's because ever since I was seven and up until my college degree, I was very passionate about visual expression. So I did everything from photography to sculpture, engraving, whatever you can think of. I probably did it at some point in my 15 years of career as an art student. But come college, and especially after graduation, there was this, I would say, deep feeling ingrained by my Eastern European parents that I have to find a proper job, right? And for a lot of people outside of college, it's, you go into consulting or you go to do your masters. And I really felt that I didn't want to do master's degree, because for me, the bachelor's that I got was extremely valuable. But I also realized that I don't want to operate just, in another school for next 2 years. So I went into M&A, because I had the economics background and I already gravitated towards startups and tech companies. So when I worked there, I started working with a lot of different startups. It was based in Slovakia, but I was working across Central Europe and helping tech founders build the story and try to help them build a financial model or pitch deck. Was, I think, the first point where I truly started to get a little bit more into entrepreneurship and understand what it's all about. And I felt that whenever I was meeting with them, I got very excited. Right, I was excited to understand their market, their product, what are they actually building, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. Let me do more of that. So that's why ever since I started working, I was like, okay, how can I get more exposure to it? Which was obviously just become a VC, right? Because that's what you do all day. You just talk to founders, you discuss their ideas, you help them get funding, and yeah, that was why I chose that career, that path. But after doing that successfully, and that wasn't necessarily an easy transition, like breaking into VC, I would say is still tricky for quite a lot of people. And for me, the path that I chose was very much by doing advisory. So I was doing advisory for tech founders, both as an M&A consultant, but also as a freelancer. And I got introduced to a lot of founders, both in Slovakia, Czech Republic, Germany. And I was kind of traveling around different accelerators, helping founders with their journeys. And I successfully helped, I think, over 15 founders rate mostly their pre-seed and seed rounds. So the average check was anywhere between a couple of dollars to, I think the maximum that I helped raise was 500,000 back then.
Okay.
And part of it was then also me getting introduced to Plug and Play in Germany, working with them for some time, and then jumping on board as a VC. So that was very much what my journey was from the consultant to the VC.
And then today, how do you go from that to working specifically in consumer and as a founder?
The same way, I started working with Philip, the founder of Combyne, as a consultant, helping him again with his pitch deck and story. And there was something in the relationship that I realized that is really special, and also in the product. And I think it was like what got me first interested in Combyne, that I joined as a late co-founder, was that there's this unique opportunity to build something at a really massive scale, right? And that's something that I would say really differentiates consumer social from other industries, because in consumer social we're talking about the most basic human behavior, which is to talk to one another, to create, which is as almost basic need as you can get, right? Besides sleeping and eating, and of course the obvious. And so having the opportunity to build something that really touches potentially almost everyone on earth was, I think, and it still is, the thing that makes me very excited. And so I also told myself, like, if I have a shot at the startup, why not make it this 0 or 100? Of course, you can do B2B sales, or I don't know, nothing wrong with that. But I feel like for me, it's never been, and this might sound stereotypical, about money, right? Because of course there are better ways to make money than in consumer social. However, when it comes to changing lives of as many people as possible, I don't think there's anything better in consumer social.
Okay, going for the changing lives dynamic. Love that. And you mentioned there that you joined Combine as a late co-founder. So
Yeah.
you join, there's already a certain structure, the team's already a certain size, there are this many users. Um, and you join as CPO straight away, right?
No, I first
No?
joined as
Okay.
a COO. So I was responsible for operations. Back then, the team was 5 people, so with me six. Still very early, and the first thing that I started doing was putting structures on processes first and foremost on the data front. So before I joined, there was some tracking, but not a lot, and I built it up together with the product development team. Of course, then we progressed more into, we successfully raised seed round, so we progressed into hiring. So I, as an operation officer, was managing the HR things in terms of setting goals, OKRs, and building general processes. In the very beginning, also with marketing, but then we stopped with that. And it was only towards the end where I also took on the role of the chief product officer.
Okay. And what does it look like to be a chief product officer at a consumer social app?
It's oftentimes trying something that you really think it's going to work and realizing it's not going to work. I guess it a lot of trial and error. I would say that what I have, the single biggest lesson is that no matter how right you think you are, your users will probably prove you wrong, and therefore there is nothing better to, on one hand, talk to them and be iterate as fast as you can. Like there's uh, like when I look at back when I started in the product role, I had so many great ideas that I felt like as soon as we implement them, oh my god, rocket ship, no doubt.
Classic.
And then a couple of months later, you have the crickets. Nothing changed. I was like, all right, so it's not going to be that easy. And it was, I must say, it was harsh. It wasn't super pleasant to learn that my great ideas are not as great. And I think there's definitely a lot of humility that is required for this job, because the thing that, no, like, you are solving what we said, or basic human needs, right? To talk, to create. But it is different to solve them for yourself and to solve them for users, and to solve them for users at a large scale. And that's what I think is one of the issues that a lot of founders in this space run into, is that you build application based on your belief, based on what you would like to do and exactly how you want to express yourself. And you have this model of the world that you think you can just create, and then all of a sudden everyone wants to belong or like use that. What I've come to realize, that that's not the case, that the world operates in a different way, and especially the human nature is oftentimes less beautiful that we think, right? You have this, like, of course, like, there's this amazing flow that you design for users that seems obvious to you, but then they actually can't use it, right? And it's because we, or like, I oftentimes thought that I thought I didn't consider so much, I would say, the emotional aspect of users, and especially that if I'm spending 10 hours a day working on this, the users are, their interactions with this product are seconds or minutes. They are not thinking things through. They are not fully concentrated, right? And that's the number one thing, that no one is as concentrated on the product as you are. Meaning you have to design it from different point of view and different perspective. So that's just a couple of things that I came to realize in the role of the product officer.
Yeah, yeah, no, let's jump to learnings. So you mentioned that one of your biggest learnings has been that your users might tell you wrong, even if you are sure or almost sure that you're going to be right. What are two other things that you're really glad that you already know now if you were to restart?
In terms of the product,
In terms of whatever, the experience of being a founder in this case.
oh, okay. Another one, uh, cliche, but definitely team matters a lot, and the speed. I never really felt how much speed matters, but it was only when I saw that you need to learn by doing that I understood that the faster you can move, the better it is. And like before, I thought that speed is what you call it, like a way to get far, but I didn't see that actually speed is your instrument to iterate and to learn. That for me, I had a different conception, right? Because I thought that you as a founder, you know where you're going. So if you are fast, you'll just get there faster, right? But on the other hand, what speed is that it actually helps you with the direction, not only with where you go, but it actually helps you to steer where you go if you go left and right. It was a big realization that I had. And another one is, again, for things to work at scale, they have to work in a small niche. We One of the things that we did well in the beginning was to focus on German market, where we had very nice, I would say, retention usage, but at some point, and that was also learning like how to work with investors, we decided to internationalize, and that was done on our end by scaling to all available countries on the App Store and Play Store without proper localization. With that, of course, came a big organic growth, but without having the proper infrastructure in place, we realized that our retention dropped from, I mean, I don't remember numbers, but it was pretty much one third of what it was before. And this is something that it took us a very long time to try to amend it. Because on one hand, it was very exciting, right? We had double digit growth over this period for 6, 7 months, which also made investors very happy, and everyone around us was looking at Combyne. Oh my God, we're growing so much. However, internally, we saw that the main metrics, when it comes to engagement, when it comes to retention, are dropping significantly. And this is one of those decisions that it's not so easy to revert, right? Because of course you can say that, okay, we are no longer available, but then you still have a lot of users that are using your app and are going to be pissed if you don't release the next update. You then have their friends who hear about Combyne but can't download it, right? So this was a spiral that we in like the end managed to sound fix, but also big learning in terms of scaling prematurely. And there's this want, okay, how can I grow? And I believe that's always the right question to ask, but also important is like, how can I grow in a way that's sustainable?
Yeah, growing unsustainably is pretty much never the answer, unless you're optimizing for some kind of vanity metric. When it
Definitely.
comes to actual success, it ain't it. And you walked us there through big learning and arguably a failure, or at least a learning. Um, let's go into failure mode, which is something people don't like to talk about, and that when you look into the consumer social industry, if you're an insider, you know that most people have failed multiple apps, multiple projects, a ton of stuff, but they don't really talk about it. What has been a failure that you particularly remember
Mm. In the space or in my
for
mind?
you personally within the industry?
Yeah, I think in industry, Clubhouse was definitely an interesting one. uh,
No,
and
but for you in your journey.
in my journey, I would say in Combine specifically, there was a big feature that we all had real big hopes for that failed spectacularly after we spent half a year working on it, more than half a year, and that was groups feature. So the insight that we had when we wanted to build it was that our users don't want to only create fashion. They don't only want to create outfits for certain occasions or upload different items, but they also like to talk about it, right? Fashion is a very social thing. Like you have sneakerheads, you have different subgroups in the fashion space where you want to communicate about the latest drop, about your favorite designer. And we saw that these communities are very fragmented, and part of them live on Reddit, part of them are in Twitter, maybe some Facebook groups, but there is not really a native platform where people who are interested in fashion could come and discuss. And we thought that why not us, right? We already have the first thing, which is the creation. So we don't only allow users to talk about it, but they can immediately show what they mean. And that sounded like an amazing idea, right? And we saw in the metrics when we looked at the users that some patterns of behavior, that if users found their friends and they formed these mini groups, what we identified by them using same hashtags. So actually, there were some self-created groups who were, yeah, tagging their content and things with the hashtag. We're like, okay, and the retention was amazing. Right? So we thought, like, okay, nothing more needed. Let's build this, and we built it, and nothing really happened. We saw that the users liked groups and they started posting them, but the discussions were not forming, and the posts that people posted in these groups were a lot of times unanswered. Right. What we didn't realize back then was that the engagement that we wanted to create in groups was actually lacking in the main app, that we shouldn't put even more um, like separation into the users, that what we actually needed was to put them all in one place where they could talk and where they could express themselves in a way that everyone else sees. What happened with groups is that we created hundreds of different subcommittees, but then these were not interesting enough, or not enough was happening for people to check them regularly, right? And this is what we realized, that we as Combyne tried to compete with Discord and Reddit, really community native apps that have much better experience when you want to talk to one another, right? You have the threads, you have posts, you have replies, you have a lot of things that make the experience what it is. And most importantly, there are enough people who check it on a regular basis. What we saw that with Combyne, because we basically try to switch the users from a weekly usage to daily usage, right? Because while you can create once a week, to post and for a group to be like feel active, you would have to be yeah, you would post there, or like you would engage with it almost on a daily basis. But that didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
So that was definitely a big learning.
Okay. So would you say it was kind of a cold start problem for you?
Yes and no. Because we did have the users, right? It's not that we didn't have them, but what we misunderstood is that they already use Combyne once, maybe two times a week. They use it as a game, as a leisure activity, uh, on the nights that they come back from school or after work. And we built a feature that was primarily meant for users or for apps that are really active on day-to-day basis, and we just weren't that, because the content that users post about fashion was not as interesting as to keep other users to come back um, very regularly.
Okay. Got it. Got it. So sort of cold start, but also the user were there. Cold start in terms of behavior, at least.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the script, what is one moment you're particularly proud of that you were a part of or that you've built somehow?
What I This is something that we did, but I would say it wasn't even intentional, but still made us
Doesn't
very
matter. Always counts.
yeah, was that we cracked TikTok before a lot of other apps went viral. And this was something that, like, or at least throughout the period, TikTok, or like we got users in the hundreds of thousands. by seeing content of Combyne on TikTok. And what happened was that in, I think, late 2019, early 2020, a couple of our users, at the point where TikTok was getting internationally more and more popular, started recording the outfits the way they create them. So they didn't show the only the final result, but they actually showed the process of them arranging items, putting them together, and yeah, kind of creating an outfit. And so they did this in a very rudimentary way, just screen recording. But when they posted this on TikTok, some of them got millions and millions of views, which we could see on our chart of users that whenever the viral video was posted, we got somewhere between a couple of thousand to tens of thousands of users, right? And it was something that we saw that, oh my God, there is this incredible channel for acquisition, which is not being understood and used by many. So we saw that, and we started working mostly with community, because this content was not like, we actually tried to create it ourselves, but we couldn't do it, right? We actually needed the hundreds and thousands of users to do the recordings and post them themselves. And we did that working with community. What we did is establish very close connections with some ambassadors, with some top users, had different challenges, and that really worked tremendously well. For, I would say, really period, we got between 300 to 500,000 users a month from TikTok as the source, and that was also one of the reasons why we could completely stop any paid advertising, because we just had amazing acquisition.
So you stopped all paid advertising because you were just gaining from TikTok?
Exactly, exactly.
Awesome. I didn't know that. It's funny how TikTok for a lot of apps is like they get this spike and then they never get it again. And then there are like a few marketeers around the world that actually understand it and are able to replicate it throughout many apps. It's like fascinating the power that they can get from it.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I saw that worked for us, that it wasn't the app itself, but it was the content that people could create, right? Because if the app was kind of interesting, but the content wasn't, then we probably would have seen a couple of spikes, but then everyone who saw that, okay, would have already installed it. But the nice thing was that it was actually the user generated content, right, about what they created. It wasn't the app specifically. So I think that's what helped us, and that's also what I see, is that it's not really, or like the marketing for this kind of apps works if what you create is interesting, if what the people have as an experience. If it's really only about the product, then that's also what I felt like is what can peter out quite quickly.
I mean, hence the what we have now, which is essentially a stream of fake user generated content all over TikTok. That is the state we're at now, and some of it works, some of it doesn't. I don't know. I'll talk more about it with different people on the show. We're actually bringing someone who's a specialist at this kind of stuff, so
All right.
gonna drill down on TikTok there. But yeah, one last question for you before we finish this off, and this is more looking at the industry, the future of the industry. So right now, there's crypto, there's AI, there are mini apps, there's games. There are a lot of things going on. What does the future of consumer social look like to you?
Very bright. And I am very hopeful for the future, because I like, again, if you think about it, do you really expect your kids or grandkids to use Facebook or to use Instagram? And I think the answer is no. So there has to be something that comes after this, right? There, just by nature of evolution, there are going to be new ways people communicate. We went from phones to emails to social networks. There is a new horizon. How far we are from it, I can't tell. Right? Is it going to be metaverse with 3D avatars, or is it going to be AI chatbots that we all communicate with? I'm not really sure, but I'm definitely sure there's going to be something. And so that's why I would say it's very exciting, and especially as we look at today's industry or landscape, still a couple behemoths occupy 80% of our time, and I think it's time we change that.
Okay, a bright future ahead. Marek, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can people find you? How can people find your work?
They can find me on Twitter, and yeah, I can also share with them. I don't know if you have any show notes, but definitely an email, and they can just email me. So yeah, very
Well,
happy to hear
now
from them.
now I will have show notes.
Amazing.
Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. This is the finish line of the third episode of the Consumer Social Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.